Every story leaves something behind. A whisper, a shadow, a question that was never answered. Here, we dig through the forgotten files, the unsolved mysteries, the chilling true crimes, and the horrors people wish had stayed buried. From haunted legends to real-life nightmares, every tale is pulled straight from the horror archives. So turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and step carefully, because once a story enters the horror archives, it never truly leaves. The first story here is called The Cabin That Had Too Many Beds. This one was sent in by a listener who attended a summer camp up in the Adirondacks. It starts with something small, a simple miscount, and slowly becomes something that refuses to be explained away. When we got to cabin 9, there were 7 beds. There were only 6 of us assigned to that cabin. I know that because I triple-checked the roster sheet stapled to the door. 6 names, 7 beds. The extra bed was in the far corner, already made up with a pillow and everything, tucked tight like someone had prepared it for an arrival. This was Camp Alderthorne, a place up in the Adirondacks my parents sent me to the summer before 8th grade. Old camp, the kind with splintered wood porches and screen doors that didn't latch right, and that permanent smell of wet pine and bug spray. Our cabin sat at the end of a dirt path near the tree line, the last one before the woods got thick and untouched. I pointed the extra bed out to our counselor, Kevin. He just laughed and said they probably miscounted the frames when they set the cabins up in the spring. Told me not to worry about it. So I didn't. Not the first night anyway. The second night, I woke up around 2 in the morning because it was cold. Not unusual for that altitude in June. But when I looked toward the corner, the sheets on the 7th bed were pulled back, like someone had gotten up. I figured one of the guys had moved in the night, maybe gone to the latrine. I counted the other beds. Every single one had a body in it. All 6 of my cabin mates were asleep. The 7th bed was just open, warm-looking, recently occupied. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next morning, I told Kevin again. He checked the bed himself, felt the sheets, and kind of paused. Then he just tucked them back in and said the wind probably got under the covers through the window screen. There was no window near that corner. By the 4th night, the small things started adding up. Our shoes by the door would be rearranged in the morning. Not drastically, just shifted a few inches in a way that felt intentional. The count of toothbrushes in the shared cup on the shelf went from 6 to 7. I counted multiple times. No one claimed the extra one. It was blue and slightly worn, like it had been used for weeks. On the 5th night, I stayed awake on purpose. I lay on my side facing the 7th bed and just watched. Around 1:30, the air in the cabin changed, got heavier. That corner seemed darker than it should have been, even with the moonlight coming through the screens. I watched for almost an hour. Nothing moved. Then at about 2:20, I heard breathing that wasn't rhythmic like sleep. It was slow and deliberate, like someone trying to control their breath. It was coming from the 7th bed. I could not see anyone in it. The sheets were flat, but the breathing was there, steady and patient, like someone lying perfectly still and staring at the ceiling. I pulled my sleeping bag over my head, and I didn't move until sunrise. The last night of that first week, I woke up to the sound of the screen door clicking shut. I sat up and looked at the 7th bed. The sheets were pulled back again, and this time there was an indentation in the pillow, a clear head-shaped depression still fresh. I looked at the door. Through the mesh screen, I could see a figure walking down the dirt path toward the woods. It was the size of a kid, maybe 12 or 13. It moved slowly, arms at its sides, bare feet in the dirt. I never saw it turn around. It walked into the tree line, and the darkness just kind of absorbed it. I told the camp director the next morning. He listened politely, wrote nothing down, and told me that cabin 9 sometimes had quirks and that they'd move me if I wanted. I asked what he meant by quirks. He changed the subject. I moved to cabin 4, but here's what still bothers me. On the last day of camp, I walked past cabin 9 one more time. The roster on the door had been replaced with a fresh one. I counted the names. There were 7. The next story takes place at a girls' camp in Tennessee, right on the shore of a cold, dark lake. It's called the buddy system. If you've ever been to a camp with lake swimming, you know the drill. The whistle blows, you grab your buddy's hand, You hold it up so the lifeguard can count. But what happens when the hand that grabs yours doesn't belong to anyone at camp? My swim buddy wasn't in the water with me when the lifeguard blew the whistle for buddy check. But when I raised my hand to signal I was alone, someone grabbed it and held it up with me. I turned and there was a girl right next to me, treading water, smiling. I had never seen her before in my life. This was Camp Roanoke, a girls' camp in eastern Tennessee, right on the edge of a lake that was spring-fed and freezing even in July. The water was dark green past the first few feet, the kind where you can't see your legs once you're waist deep. There were ropes sectioning off the swimming areas, and the buddy system was enforced religiously. You always had a partner. You always checked in together. My actual buddy that session was a girl named Priya. She'd gotten out early because she was cold. I'd seen her leave, so when the whistle blew, I knew I was alone. But then this girl was just there. She had dark, wet hair plastered across her forehead, and a navy one-piece that didn't match our camp-issued swimsuits. Her skin was pale in a way that looked almost gray in the overcast light. She said hi. I said hi back, because what else do you do when you're 13? The lifeguard saw 2 hands up and moved on. No one questioned it. I asked her what cabin she was in. She said cabin 12. We only had 11 cabins. When I told her that, she just tilted her head slightly and said, "Oh," like it was a mild inconvenience. Then the whistle blew again to signal free swim was over, and everyone started heading to the ladders. She went under the water. I waited for her to surface. She didn't. I watched for at least 30 seconds. The water where she'd been was perfectly still. I scrambled to the ladder and got out. I told the lifeguard that a girl had gone under and hadn't come up. They cleared the lake immediately. 2 counselors dove down with goggles. They searched for 20 minutes. They found nothing. No body. No disturbance. Nothing at the bottom but rocks and silt. The head counselor pulled me aside and asked me to describe the girl. I did. She wrote it down. Then she asked me something strange. She asked if the girl had been cold to the touch. I thought about it, and she had been. When she grabbed my hand, her fingers were ice cold. Not lakewater cold. Deeper cold. The kind that doesn't come from temperature. That night at the campfire, I overheard 2 of the older counselors whispering. One of them mentioned that a girl had drowned in the lake 11 years earlier. She'd been found a full day later near the dam at the south end. Her buddy that day said she'd been right beside her 1 second and gone the next. They never figured out how it happened. The lake was only 5 feet deep in that section. I didn't go back in the water for the rest of the session, but the thing that keeps me awake is something that happened on the second to last day. We were doing a group photo on the dock. Everyone lined up, arms around each other, big smiles. When the photos were posted on the camp website a few weeks later, I zoomed in on ours. In the far right of the frame, standing at the edge of the dock, there's a girl. Dark hair, navy swimsuit. She's not smiling. She's looking directly at the camera, and the water behind her, right below where she's standing. There's no reflection. The dock, the ropes, the trees, everything else reflects. But where she's standing, the water is just black. I emailed the camp about it. They said the photo had been removed for quality reasons, and that they couldn't discuss it further. The page now shows a different group photo, one I don't remember being taken. This last story is the one that genuinely unsettled me the most out of these 3. It's called the Night Hike Headcount. It was sent in by someone who attended a camp in northern Michigan, and it involves something joining a group of kids in the dark, something that the counselors noticed, but chose not to address until it was too late. Our counselor counted us 3 times before the night hike. 14 kids. She counted us again at the halfway point. 15. Nobody had joined us. The trail was a closed loop through the woods, behind Camp Blackpine in northern Michigan. No crossroads, no intersections, no other groups out that night. Just us, a single flashlight at the front, and another at the back. 14 campers, 2 counselors. That was the manifest. The trail wound through dense forest, the kind of dark that feels physical. No moon that night. The trees were so thick overhead that even if there had been stars, we wouldn't have seen them. The air smelled like decomposing leaves and something faintly metallic, like old pennies. We walked single file because the path was too narrow for anything else. At the turnaround point, there was a small clearing with a fire pit. That's where Counselor Dana did the second head count. She went down the line, tapping each kid on the shoulder. I watched her lips move as she counted. When she got to the end, she stopped, went back to the beginning, counted again. Her face changed, not dramatically, just a small tightening around her eyes. She pulled the other counselor, Marcus, aside. I was close enough to hear her whisper. She said, "There's 15. He told her to count again. She did. 15. He counted. 15. They both stood very still for a moment. Then Marcus said something I'll never forget. He said, "Don't tell them, just keep moving, and we'll sort it out back at the main lodge." So we kept walking, but now both counselors were watching us differently, scanning faces. I could see Dana trying to identify who didn't belong. The problem was that in the dark, with everyone in the same camp hoodie, it was almost impossible. You could see outlines, the reflective strips on our sneakers, the occasional face lit by flashlight, but not details. Not enough to say that one shouldn't be here. I started trying to figure it out myself. I knew most of the kids. Jackson was in front of me. Behind me was a kid I was pretty sure was Tyler from Cabin 3. But the more I tried to place everyone, the less certain I became. In the dark, faces started looking wrong. Familiar people seemed slightly off. I couldn't tell if I was being paranoid or if something was genuinely different about the person walking 2 spots behind me. Then I noticed something. Whoever was walking directly behind Marcus at the back of the line wasn't making any noise. No footsteps, no breathing. Everyone else was shuffling through leaves, snapping twigs, whispering to each other. But that last figure was silent, completely silent, just a shape moving in the darkness, keeping pace. We were about 10 minutes from camp when it happened. Marcus swept his flashlight back to do another head count. The beam passed over every face in line. When it hit the person at the very back, the last one in line behind where Marcus had been walking, the light seemed to dim. Not like the batteries were dying, like the darkness around that figure was eating the light. I saw a face for maybe half a second. It was a kid's face, but the expression was wrong. It was smiling, but the smile didn't move. It was fixed, like it had been carved there. And the eyes caught the light the way animal eyes do. Not human reflection. Taperum lucidum. Eyes shine. Marcus turned the flashlight off immediately. He grabbed Dana and said something I couldn't hear. Then he said loudly, calmly, "Okay, everyone, we're going to jog the rest of the way back. Nice and easy. Stay together." We jogged. Nobody questioned it. I think everyone felt it by then. That wrongness, that heaviness in the air, like the woods were watching us from every direction. When we burst into the main lodge clearing, the floodlights hit us, and both counselors immediately started counting. 14. Just 14. Everyone accounted for. Nobody extra. Marcus and Dana reported the incident to the camp director. They were told to keep it to themselves. I only know what happened in that meeting because Marcus told me years later, when I ran into him at a gas station in Traverse City. He said the director turned pale and asked which trail they'd taken. When Marcus told him the North Loop, the director nodded slowly and said that trail had been closed for 2 years because of an incident. He wouldn't say what the incident was. Marcus asked him what had been walking with them. The director said he didn't know. Then he said something that Marcus said changed the way he heard it every time he replayed it in his mind. He said it doesn't always leave when you get back to the lights. I asked Marcus what he meant by that. He just stared at me for a long time and said after that night, for the rest of the summer, every single head count at Camp Blackpine came up 1 over. Every single one. Morning roll call, meal counts, activity groups, always 1 extra. They never found out who it was. They shut the camp down at the end of that summer. It never reopened.
And that's where tonight's file closes, but the archives are far from empty. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover more horrors, mysteries, and true crimes hidden in the horror archives. Until next time, keep the lights low, keep listening, because you never know what story we'll uncover next.